Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Now in today's video, we're going to build a social networking website like Instagram using just HTML and CSS. For comparison, this is the original Instagram website and this is the one we are going to build today. Now in this course, you're not just going to build a UI, you're actually going to learn a lot. You are going to learn how to create a modern website layout and how to create a responsive design. We are going to create this left sidebar right here. We're going to create this scrollable feed section right here. And also this status section, you can actually scroll through the status and see the status of users. We're also going to create this messages button right here. When the user clicks on this messages button, it's going to open the latest messages of that user. And when you click on this X, it's going to close it back up. We're actually going to achieve that using a little bit of JavaScript. And we're also going to have this right hand side right here. You can see this footer right here, copyright 2025 Egbon Tech YouTube channel. We are not going to stop there. We're going to ensure this website is fully responsive on all screen devices. And whatever screen device you view this website on is going to be fully responsive, even for mobile devices. And this is an excellent project for you to add to your portfolio as a front-end developer. If you're a beginner in HTML and CSS, you don't have to get overwhelmed. We're going to start together from scratch and we're going to build this together step by step. And I'm going to explain everything without skipping any step. If you would like to follow along with this project and use the exact images I'm using, I'm going to leave a link to the startup files below in the description. That link is going to take you to a GitHub repo that has all the startup files, including the images. Also, if you'd like to view this project live, it's basically hosted on Vast. I'm going to leave a link to it in the description below. Now, if you're excited about this project, smash on the like button and leave a comment below of what project you'd like to see next on this channel. And lastly, if you've not subscribed, ensure you do that and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss out on the next project we're going to build on this channel. Let's dive into it. So I've already created my index.html file. Now inside this HTML file, I have this link right here that's actually importing Fort Awesome through this CDN link right here. I also have this style.css link right here that's connecting this index.html file to this style.css file right here. And inside this style.css file, up here, I'm importing two fonts. I'm importing Poppins and I'm importing Pacifico from Google Fonts. And down here, I'm applying Poppins to the web page. And also, I have an images folder right here that contains all the images we are going to use for this project. Now, these images are going to be available in the startup file repo. All you have to do is clone that repo and you have access to all these images. Now, let's start working on our project. So I'm going to close up this sidebar right here. I'm going to head to my index.html file. Now, inside my index.html file, I'm going to create a main. Now, inside this main, I'm going to create an aside. And this is going to be our left sidebar. That's the sidebar we're going to have at the left hand side. So I'm going to give this a class of left sidebar. Now this is going to be our left sidebar. So let's just label that. I'll say left sidebar. I'll comment that off. Then after that, I'm going to create our main section, which is going to be the feed. So down here, I'm going to say main feed. And I'll comment that off. Now this one is going to be a section with a class of main feed. Okay. And the left sidebar is going to represent this part right here, this left hand side right here. While that main feed section is going to represent this part that is going to be scrollable. Okay. So let's head back to our Visual Studio Code. So let's start working on the left sidebar. Now inside the left sidebar, we're going to have a logo at the top of the left sidebar that is going to say social. And after that, we're going to have nav link. So I'm going to create a nav tag. Now inside this nav tag, we're going to have an anchor tag. Now this anchor tag is not going to lead anywhere. So I just put in the hash here. And inside the anchor tag, we're going to have an icon that's going to have a class of fast far home. And inside this anchor tag too, we're going to have a span that's simply going to say home. I'll copy this and I'll drag that down. The second icon is going to have a class of fastfar search and it's going to say search. I'm going to save that. Now to run this application, I'm going to click on Go Live because I have Visual Studio Code Live Server extension installed in my Visual Studio Code. So I just click on Go Live. And this is going to open up this project in a web browser. You can see those, and you can see those items we just added, the sociogram text we added, and the 2 links we added to our left sidebar. So let's start styling the left sidebar. But before we do that, I'm going to get rid of this background color and apply the background color we are going to use for this project. So I'm going to go back to my style.css file. Down here, I'm going to say body. I'm going to give it a background color of bg main. That's these variables up here, these color variables up here. You're going to find them in the startup files. Okay, so I'm going to save that. Now when I return back to the web page, you can see that we now have a black background. All right, so let's start styling the left sidebar. So I'm going to go back to my index.html file. I'm going to copy this left sidebar class right here. I'll copy this. Then I'm going to head to my style.css file. Down here, I'll just paste that right here. For the left side, I want to give it a position of fixed, left of 0. I want it to be positioned on the left hand side of the web page. A width of 250 pixels and a height of 100 VH. Okay, so I'm going to give this a background color so that we can actually see it. So I'll give it a background color of red. So when I return back to the web page, you can see that we have our left sidebar right here, and that's a background color of red. Okay, but we don't want it to have this background color of red. To actually know that we have a left sidebar here, I'm going to add the border to it that you're going to see on the original Instagram application. So I'm going to go back there. I'm going to get rid of this. Then I'm going to say border right 1 pixels solid var. I'm going to use one of our variable colors, the one named border color. I'm going to save that. When I return back to the web page, you're going to notice that we now have a border at the right hand side of this left side bar. Now you're going to notice that we cannot see our logo right here. That's because by default, p tags, span tags, and even h1 tags have a color of black, which means you can't see them in the black background. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a general style for our p tag. So up here, I'm going to say p. I want all the p tags to have a color of white. I'll save that. Now when I return back to the web, you're going to notice that we can now see that text right here, sociogram. Okay, you are going to notice that the items of the left sidebar are too close to the edges. Okay, so we're going to add a padding around it. So I'm going to go to my left sidebar styles. Down here, I'm going to say padding. I'm going to apply a padding of 20 pixels. Okay, now when I return back, you're going to notice that it now has a padding around it, and this is actually looking way better. So next, I'm going to style up the logo. Okay, so I'm going to head back to my style.css file, copy this, and I'll just target the logo. To do that, I'll just create a class name in that logo p tag. I also say this is going to have a class of logo. Then I'll go to my style.css file. First of all, I'll just copy this. I head to my style.css file. Then I'll just paste that logo right here. Then I'm going to give this a font size of 1.5 rem. Now I'll give it a font family of this font family up here, this Pacifico font family. So I'll just copy that. I'll scroll down. Then I'll paste that right here. Then the fallback font family is going to be cursive. I'll save that. And I return back to the web page. You're going to notice that our logo is looking really, really good. So next, we're going to start styling the links of the left sidebar. Okay, so let's do that. So I'm going to go back to my style.css file. Then down here, I'll just target the nav. Remember that the nav is what actually wraps around all our links. Okay, so the nav is the container that wraps around all our links. So first off, I'm going to give this nav a margin top of 25 pixels, and that's going to add a margin between the logo and the links right here. Now I'm going to target each of the links. So I just copy this, I'll paste that underneath here, and I'll target each of the anchor tags. Now give them a display of flex, okay, and an align items of center. I'll save that. Now when I return back to the web, you're going to know that the links are actually looking better. So next, what I'm going to do is I want to get rid of the underline on this link and also change the color to white. Okay, so what I could do is that I could come to this nav anchor tag and actually apply the styles here, but I want the styles to be shared by all the anchor tags in this web page. So what I'm going to do, I want to go up here and create a general style. So to get rid of the underline, we'll say text decoration. I'm going to use none. Then I'm going to say color. I'll say white. And this is actually going to make the links look better. You're going to see that that underline is no longer there and the links are actually now white. Okay. You are going to notice that the links are too close to each other. So we're going to add a margin between them. So I'm going to go back to the links. I'm going to add a margin. I'll say margin. Top and bottom, I want them to have a margin of 12 pixels. And left and right, I want them to have a margin of 0. And also I add a padding. Top and bottom, I want a padding of 50 pixels. Left and right, I want a padding of 10 pixels. And that's actually going to make them look way better. They're going to see that they have a margin and a little bit of padding between them. Next, I'm going to add a gap between this icon and this text right here. So I want to add a gap between the item of this anchor tag, a gap of 15 pixels, okay? And that's going to add a gap between these two items. So next, I'm going to increase the font size of the icon. So I'll just copy this. Then I'll paste this here. Now I'll target the icon inside this anchor tag. I'll give it a font size of 1.3 rem. Okay. Now when I save that, I'm going to notice that the font size of this icon is actually going to increase. Now the span tag already looks great. We don't really have to style that anymore. So next we're going to add a background color. When we hover on this link, we want to apply a background color. So let's do that. So I'm going to go back to my style of CSS. So I'll copy this. Now when someone hovers on this link, paste that right here. When someone hovers on this link, I want to apply a background color of this hover background color right here from our CSS variables. I'll save that. When I go back to the web page, when I hover on this link, I'm going to notice that little background on it. Alright. Now all that's left to do is just apply a border radius to this. So I'm going to go back there. Go back to my anchor tag. I'll just add a border radius of 10 pixels. Yeah, that looks way better. Now, since we already understand how we created these two links in our HTML, I will style them up in our style of CSS. To save time, I'm just going to add the other links, then I'm going to return back. Now, down here underneath this search link, I'll just paste the other links right here. Now, the third one is going to be explore. You have the font right here, far compass. Then the fourth one is going to be reels. Then we have the icon fast video. The fifth one is going to be messages. We have the icon right here, notifications, create, and then we have dashboard. So I'm going to save that. Then I'll go back to the web page. You can see the other links have been added. But we are not done yet. In our final project, you're going to notice that for the profile link, we are going to be having an image. We're not going to have an icon. We're going to have our image right here. So let's actually work on that. So now I'm just going to copy this. Now drag that down. Now this text is going to be profile. Then for this one, we're not going to have an icon. We're going to have an image instead. Okay. And this image is going to point into this image folder. And it's going to access the image1.jpg. And the alt text is going to be profile pic. Okay. Now when I return back to the web page, you can see that humongous image right here. It's very large. Okay. So let's actually style this image up. So I head back to my style of CSS file. I'm going to go to my style of CSS file. Now down here, I'm going to say nav. And I want to target the anchor tag of the nav. Then I want to target the image inside the anchor tag. Okay. I want to give this image a width of 25 pixels, a height of 25 pixels, a border radius of 50%. And to actually make the image look good, I'm going to give it an object fit. I'll use cover. I'll save that. And when I return back to the web page, you can see right now we have our profile link right here. And with that, we are basically done with the left sidebar. For the main feed, we're going to have two sections. We're going to have this section right here that's going to house this status and also the post. And then we're going to have this right-hand side right here. It's going to house the suggested for you and this profile right here. Okay. So let's start working on that. So I'm going to head back to my index.html file. Now just wrap up everything inside this aside because I'm basically done with the left side, but I'll wrap everything up. And inside this section right here, inside this section, we're going to have two divs. And the first div is going to have a class of feeds. And the second div is going to have a class of main feed right. Okay. Now let's start styling them up. So I'm going to copy this main feed right here. I'll head to my style of CSS file. Down here, I'm just going to paste that right here. I'm going to give it a height. I'll give it a height of 100 VH. Okay. I'll give it a display of flex. Now I'm going to target the feed and the main feed right. Okay. So I'm just going to copy this. Now paste that underneath here. Then I'm going to target that dot fit class we have in there. That's this class we have in there. This fit class. So I'm going to give this a flex of 1. Okay. Now I'll do the same thing for the main feed right. I'll paste that underneath here. Now just copy that main feed right class from here. I'll copy this. Then I'll head back to my style of CSS file. Then I'll paste that right here. Then I'm going to give this a flex of 1. Okay. Now what this is going to do is going to ensure that both the feeds and the main feed device is going to occupy as much space as they can get. Okay. So I'm going to give this one a background color of blue. Then I'll give this one a background color of red so that we can actually see the area they are occupying. So when I head back to the web page, you're going to notice that we now have these two items right here, blue and red. Now the one on the left hand side is our feed, and the one on the right hand side, the red one, is our main feed right. But you can see the problem right now, that the main feed section is actually covering our left sidebar. We don't want that. What we want is that we want our main feed to start around here. Okay, we don't want it to actually get to where the left sidebar is. Okay, so what we are going to do, we're going to give this main feed a margin left property. So I'm going to head back to my style of CSS file. I'm going to say I want to give this main feed a margin left. I'm going to use 25%. I'll save that. Now when I return back to the web, you're going to notice that the main feed is going to start around here. It's not going to get close to the left sidebar anymore. And we also don't want the main feed to get to the extreme end. Okay, we want a margin at the right hand side too. So we're going to give it a margin right of 10%. Okay, and when I return back, you notice it now has a margin at the right hand side. All right, cool. Now you notice that in our final project, this main feed, this section right here, this feed section has a larger width than this right side right here. Okay, this right side is actually smaller than this. But when you look at our current project, you're going to see that they are equal. We don't actually want that. What we want this blue part to actually be larger. So instead of giving this blue part a flex of 1, I'm going to give it a flex of 2. I'm basically telling it occupy twice as much as the main feed right. So when I save that, you're going to notice that it's going to occupy twice as much, while the main feed right is going to occupy the smaller portion. All right. So now that we have gotten the layers, I'm going to get rid of this background color. So I'll just get rid of this background color of red. I'll get rid of this background color of blue. Then I'll save that. So next, we can start working on this right hand side. So let's do that. So before we start working on this right side, I want to first of all quickly add a active class to these links right here. Okay, so I'm going to create an active class. I'm going to go to my style of CSS file. I'll go up here. Then down here, I'm going to say nav dot active class. This is going to have a font weight of 600. So I'll just copy that class name. I'll head to my index.html file. Then I'll paste it in my very first link, which is acting as our active class. I'll give this a class of active. I'll save that. Now when I return back to the web page, I'm going to notice that this first link has a higher font weight because it's going to be acting as the active class. Okay, so next let's start working on this right main side. Inside my index.html file, I'll just wrap this up again. Then I'm going to label this. This is going to be our feeds. I'll label it. Then for this one, it's going to be our main feed right. That's the right hand side of our feed. Now also comment this out. And for the right hand side, first of all, we're going to have this link right here, this image, this text, and this switch button right here. So let's start working on that. Now inside this main feed right div, I'll create a div. I'll give this a class name of sidebar item. And inside this sidebar item, I'm going to have a div that's going to have a class name of account info. Okay. And inside this account info div, first of all, we're going to have an image, and this image is going to go into the images folder and it's going to access image1.jpg, and the alt text is going to be profile pic. And after that, we're going to have another div, and this div is going to house an anchor tag that's not going to go anywhere. This one is going to be Egbon Tech, and it's also going to house a p tag that is simply going to say Egbon Emmanuel. Okay, after this account info div, we're going to have another anchor tag that's not going to go anywhere, and the text inside is going to be switch. I'll save that. Now when I return back to the web page, I'm going to notice that we have this humongous image in the web page, very, very large image. So let's quickly style this up. So I'm going to head to my style.css file. I'm going to scroll down, then down here I'm going to say main feed right. Remember that we are trying to target the image inside this sidebar item container. So we're going to copy this class name. Then I'll just paste that right here. Then I'll target the image inside this container. Okay, I'll give it a width of 40 pixels, a height of 40 pixels, a border radius of 50%, and lastly, an object fit of cover. Okay, and when I return back to the web, you're going to notice that our image is completely styled, but we have a problem. You're going to notice that these items are too close to the top of this web page right here. Okay, so we could add a padding to the right main side, but what I want to do is I want to add a padding generally to the main feed. Okay, so I head to the style.css file. Up here I want to go to the main feed. I'll add a padding top and bottom. I'm going to give it 30 pixels. Left and right I'm going to give it 0. And when I return back to the web page, you're going to notice that that padding has been applied and it's not at the top of the web page anymore. Next, I'm going to give the container that houses this image and this username and this name a display flex. I want this switch to be positioned right here, and I want these ones to be positioned at the left hand side. So I'm going to head to my style.css file. I'll just copy these sidebar items because the items are inside the sidebar item container. Then I'll just give them a display. I'll say flex. Justify content. I'll use space between. Then I'm going to say align items. I'm going to use center. And when I save that and return back to the web, you're going to notice that these switch buttons are at the right hand side, while this item, this account info, is at the left hand side. Now next, we're going to style up the left hand side of this sidebar item. Okay, so I'm going to head back to my style.css file. I'll just copy this. I'll paste this underneath here. I want to target that account info container, so I'm just going to copy that class right here. Copy this class. I'll paste that right here, and I'm going to give this a display of flex, and that's going to ensure that these items are going to be arranged side by side. Okay, I'll give it an align items of center and a gap of 12 pixels. That's going to be the sweet spot. When I return back, you're going to see right now they are now arranged side by side, and there's a gap between both of them. So now we're going to style up this Egbon Tech username. Remember, this is an anchor tag, so we'll just target the anchor tag. So I'm going to head back to my style.css file. I'll just copy this. I'll paste that underneath here. Now I'm going to target the anchor tag in there. But we are going to face a problem. Remember that we have two anchor tags inside this sidebar item. We have this first anchor tag that's going to say Egbon Tech, and we have the other anchor tag that's going to say switch. Okay, so we have to tell CSS to only target the first one. So how are we going to do that? We're going to go to our style.css and I'm going to use a pseudo class called the first child. Now this is only going to target the first anchor tag. I'll give this a font size of 0.85 rem, and a font weight of 500. I'll save that, and that's actually looking better. Next, I'm going to style up this p tag that says Egbon Emmanuel. Okay, so I'm going to copy that account info. I'll paste that underneath here. Then I want to target the p tag in there. I'll give this p tag a font size of 0.75 rem, a font weight of 300, and a color of test secondary. I'll save that. And when I return back to the web, you can see this is actually looking way better. So next I'm going to style up this switch button right here. So I'm going to head back to my style of CSS file. I'll just copy this. I'll paste that underneath here. Now I want to target the last anchor tag, say last child, as the last anchor tag inside this sidebar item. I'll give it a color of blue. And I'll give it a font size of 0.7 rem. Okay, I'll save that. Now when I go back to the web, you can see that button is completely styled up. Next, when I hover on this, I want this to have a text color of white. So let me quickly do that. So I just copy this, paste that underneath here. I'm going to say on hover of this link, I want it to have a color of text primary, which is basically white. And when I hover on it, you're going to notice that it's going to be white. So after our sidebar item, we're going to have a h2 tag. So down here, I'm going to have a h2 tag. Let me just wrap up the sidebar item. And this h2 tag is simply going to say suggested for you. So when I go back to the web page, we cannot see that text. That's because we've not styled it. Remember that I said that all the text in HTML by default are black in color, so we cannot actually see it. So let's quickly style that up. So I head to my style of CSS file. Now I'm just going to copy this. Then I want to target the h2 tag in there. First of all, I'm going to add a margin. Top and bottom, I want to have a margin of 20 pixels. Left and right, a margin of 0. A font size of 0.8 rem. A font weight of 500. And lastly, I want the color to be test secondary. I'll save that. When I go back to the web page, you can see that h2 text right here and it's completely styled and it's looking really, really good. So next, we're going to start creating a suggested for you list. Now you quickly notice that these items right here are similar to this item, which means we can reuse these codes right here. So let's do that. So I'm going to go back to my index.html file. I'll go back there now. I'll just copy this sidebar item. Then I'll paste that underneath this h2 tag right here. Then I'll save that. Now when I go back to the web, you can see now we have another one right here. But for this one, this button is not going to be switch. This is going to be follow. Okay, and also we have to update the name, the username, and the image. Okay, so let's do that. For this one, it's going to be image 2. The username is going to be tech savvy, and the name is going to be Tina Savvy. I'll save that. And you can see that it's actually been updated right here. And to save time, I'm going to add the remaining 4 items in the suggested for you list. And I'm going to return back. Now I've pasted there. You can see we have 4 other items right here. So after tech savvy, Tina Savvy, we have another one right here with image of profile picture of image 4, username code bender, name Chris Bender. Then we have the next one, profile picture of image 5, then name, username of Lizzie Codes, then name Lizzie Obasi. Then we have the next one, username of John Snap, name John Oko, then the image 6. Then we have the last one, username Dave, name Dave Richards, and the profile image is image 7. So I'm going to save that and check out the output. And you can see all of them right here. Underneath this text tab, we have the other list of items in the suggested for you. But we have a problem. The items are too close to each other. So what we are going to do, we're going to add a margin bottom to each of these items. Okay. So I'm going to scroll up to the very first item. This one, I'm going to give it a style property. I give it margin bottom. I give it 15 pixels. Now just copy this. I'll scroll down. I'll paste that here. I'll paste that here. I'll paste that here. Then I also paste that on the last one. I'll save that. And now you can see they are looking way better this way. So next, I'm going to add this footer underneath this right hand side. Copyright 2025. It won't take YouTube channel. Let's do that. And say my index.html. I just wrap up this suggested list right here, and they are not inside a container. Let me just create a div container for them. Then I'll just copy all the items of the suggested list. I'll cut that and I'll just put them inside a container. That way I can easily just wrap them up by wrapping up the div. Just wrap this up. Okay, and then I'm going to create a footer, and this footer is going to have a p tag. Inside this p tag, I'm going to add that copyright symbol. In 2025 Igbon Tech YouTube channel. I'll save that. And I head back to the web page. You can see that text right here. Copyright 2025 Igbon Tech YouTube channel. So I head to my style.css to actually style this up. So I'll go to my style.css. Down here, I'm going to target the footer. I'm going to give it margin, top and bottom. I'll give it 40 pixels. Then left and right, 0. Then I'll target the footer p tag. That's the p tag inside the footer. I'll give it a font size of 0.8 rem. I'll give it a font weight of 300. And lastly, I'll give it a color of text secondary. I'll save that. And you can see that the footer is actually looking really good now. Now with that, we are basically done with the main feed right now. So let's start working on the feeds, okay? The status section and the post. So I head back to my index.html file. I'll go to my index.html file now. Now inside this div right here, feed, this is where we're going to add the code for our status section and our post, okay? Inside here, I'm going to create a div, and this is going to have a class of status section. And inside this div, I have another div that's going to have a class of status, which is going to represent each status, okay? So let's start applying styles to this. I'll copy this status section right here, this class name, right to my style.css file. Now here, I'll just paste down, I'll say .main field .feeds. Then I'll paste that right here. Now, first of all, this is going to have a display of flex. So I want all the items inside this container to be arranged horizontally, okay? So I'll give it a gap, each of the items a gap of 12 pixels. Then next, I'll just style the individual status, okay? I'll paste that underneath here. Then I'll just target that status class. That's this status class inside this status section, this status class right here. I'll target that. Therefore, each of these status, I want to give them a height of 65 pixels, a width of 65 pixels, a border radius of 50% because I want them to be circular. And for us to actually see, I want to give it a background color. I'll use red. Okay, I'll save that. When I go back to the web page, I'm going to see that we have one status right here. This circular red status right here. I'll just add a background to the status section so we can actually see that too. So I'll say background color. I'll give it blue. And now we can see the status section and the area it actually occupies. But you can see right now that the status section is actually too close to this main feed, right? It's too close to it, okay? We don't want it to get to this point. We want it to stop around here. We want a gap between it and this main feed, right? Okay, so we're going to add a gap. So we're going to head back to our CSS. That feeds container, that main feed will give a display of flex for the feeds and the main feed. We're going to add a gap to that style. So I'm going to go up this right here. This one will give a display of flex. We're going to give it a gap. I'll use 80 pixels. I'll save that. When I return back to the web page, I'm going to notice that there's now a gap between this feeds right here and this main feed, right? And this is actually way better. Okay, so next I'm going to add more status items. That's this red circle more to this container right here. So I'm going to go back to my index.html file. Now I just take this, I just drag this down multiple times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'll save that. And you can see we have actually 9 of them now. Now everything seems to be working fine. You're going to notice something that is going to happen when I add more. Now when I add more, 1, 2, 3, 4, you are going to notice that it's going to start to actually expand and actually squish this right side right here. Okay, and the reason this is happening is because remember we gave this container a display of flex, then we gave this feeds a flex of 2. We gave this feeds right here a flex of 2, then we gave this main feed right a flex of 1. Okay, but right now you can see that even with that flex property, this one is actually expanded to actually compress this one. This one is no longer at flex of 1. This one is at a flex of like 0.1, 0.2 right now. Okay, but we don't want that, and it's going to make our web page actually have to overflow. We don't want that. What we want is that when the items inside this status container, this status section container overflows, we want to be able to scroll through it. So what we are going to do, we're going to give this entire main feed, like this main feed right here, we give a flex of 2, a minimum width of 0. Okay, so I'm going to go back here and I'm going to say I want this to have a minimum width of 0. I'll save that. And when I return back to the web, you're going to notice that it no longer expands. What it does instead is actually compress the items inside of the status section. That each of the status is going to compress them so that they are going to be able to occupy the status container, okay, without overflowing. But at the same time, we don't want the status to actually shrink. We want them to retain their height and width of 65 pixels. So what we are going to do, we're going to go to this status right here, this status class right here. Then we're going to say we want each of the items to have a flex shrink of 0. We don't want them to shrink, and that's going to ensure that these items are not going to shrink. Now, instead of them shrinking, they are going to overflow. Now what we are going to do is that we're going to give this blue container an overflow of auto. Okay, what that is going to do, that's going to ensure that when these red circles overflow this blue container, this status container, we can actually scroll through it to actually see more of it. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to my start.css file. Down here I'm going to say overflow X, I'm going to say auto, then overflow Y, I'm going to use hidden. Now this overflow X auto is going to ensure that we can scroll through it horizontally when it overflows horizontally. Then the overflow Y hidden is going to hide any vertical overflow we have. So I'm going to go back to the web page. You're going to notice that right now we can actually now scroll through this status list right here, and it's looking really good. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of this ugly scroll bar. To do that, I'm going to copy this right here, copy this, paste that here. Now say : web kit scroll bar. I'll give it a height of 0. That's going to get rid of that scroll bar for us right there. So with that, we're basically done actually getting the structure of this status section. So I want to get rid of this blue background color. Okay, so I just get rid of this. Then for this, instead of background color of red, it's going to be background color of gray. And you can see now the circle now has a background color of gray. So I'm going to just get rid of the other circles and just make use of one. So I'm going to go back. I'll just remove these other ones and just leave only the first one. I'll save that, and we'll just have one to work with. Now remember that in our finished project, this status section, some of these images have a gradient background color, okay, while some has a gray, and these ones that has a gray shows that there's no active status, okay, while these ones that has a background color of gray, which means the user has an active status you've not actually seen. So to actually achieve this rainbow like background color, we're going to use conic gradient. I'm going to head to my style.css file. After this status style right here, then I'm going to create a unique ID style. I'll call this one new status. Okay, now this is going to have a background, and this background is going to be a conic gradient, and it's going to start from 225 degrees. Now we have to add the colors. Now in the startup file, we actually have that colors up here. I'm going to find these colors up here. These colors are commented up here. So just copy these colors, head back down, and just paste that colors white here. Now save that. Now when I return back to the web page, nothing really happens because we've not applied that ID to this status right here. Okay, so I'm going to go to my index.html file. I'll just create another status, then I'll add that ID to it. I'll add the ID of new status. I'll save that. When I return back to the web page, you're going to notice that this one has a gray background color and this one has a kind of rainbow like background color, because it's actually a conic gradient of different colors. So remember, each of these status is going to have an image and the username of the user that actually posted the status. Okay, so let's do that. I'm going to go back to my index.html file. Now inside this status, I want to add an image. Image. And this is going to go into the images folder. It's going to access status 1.jpg, and the alt text is going to be status. Then after this status, we're going to have a p tag that is simply going to say techie gear. Now just wrap this p tag and this status div inside a div container. Just wrap them up in a div. I'll paste that right here. Now when I return back to web, you can see that the image is actually there, but it's very large. So let's start styling it up. I'm going to go back to my style of CSS file. Now just copy this right here. I'll paste that underneath here. Now I want to target the image inside this status, okay? I'll give this image a width of 60 pixels, a height of 60 pixels, a border radius of 50%, an object feet of cover. Now coming back to the web page, you're going to notice that we have that image right here inside this gray circle, but the image is not actually at the center. So let's ensure the image is at the center. So I'm going to go back to my status. I'll give this a display. I'll use grid. Then a place items. I'll use center. I'll save that. Now coming back to the web page, I'm going to notice that it's not at the center of that gray background. Now I'm going to add a black border around the image. So I'm just going to go back there. I'm going to add a black border. I want this to have a border of 2 pixels, solid BGM, that's solid black. Now you are going to notice that black border around this image. Now this is looking really good. So next, let's style up this p tag. So I'm just going to go back to my style of CSS file. I'll copy this, because this p tag is not inside the status container. So I'm just going to copy up to the status section. I'll paste that underneath and I'll target the p tag in there. I'll give it a margin, top and bottom of 5 pixels, left and right of 0. A text align, I'll say center. A font size, I'm going to use 0.7 rem. I'll save that and go back to the web page. And you can see this is actually looking really good. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to add that new status ID to this, okay? So you can see the rainbow effect with the image. So I'm going to go back here. I'll just get rid of this since we understood how we created that rainbow background. Then for this status, I'm going to add an ID of new status. I'll save that. Now returning back to the web page, you're going to notice that rainbow effect at the back of this image. But we're actually not done styling this status. Now you're going to notice that if I go back to my index.html file and I add more items to this, you're going to notice that this will start to actually expand. Now imagine we have another status right here, and this one is the text of this one is getting up to this point. Where is this text of the second status going to be? Okay, so we are actually going to solve this problem. What I'm going to do, I'm going to give this p tag, as this p tag, the same width as our image. So I'm going to say I want this p tag to have a width of 60 pixels. Okay, then I'm going to give it a overflow of hidden, and this is going to ensure that when the text overflows that width, it's going to be hidden from the viewport. To actually make this look way better, I'm going to add an ellipsis. Okay, so I'm going to say text overflow. I'm going to use ellipsis. Now what this is going to do is that when the text overflows, it's going to add these 3 dots at the end to signify to the user that the username is actually longer than what you can actually see. There's more to it. Techie get, there's actually more. So it's going to add this little ellipsis to it. That way, when the username of the user is actually very long, it's not going to affect the next status. Okay, it's just going to stop right here. So I'm going to go back to my HTML file, just get rid of this and leave it as techie gear. So I'm going to add more status. So I'm just going to go to my index.html file. I'll just copy this div. I'll drag that down. Then this one is going to be status 2. And the username is going to be this username right here. So I'll add another one. I'll drag that down. And this one, the status image is going to be status 3. The username is going to be queen.sid. Go back to the web page, and you can see we have those 2 status being added, and the status section is looking really good. Now that we understand how we created this status section and we actually styled it up, I'm going to also add the other status to actually save time. And then after the third status, I'll just paste the other status right here. And you can see that we have other status. We have the second one, Dami XO status 4 as the image. Then the second one, Black Cypher, the username. Then the next one, Alima short username, then Nina Daily, iop.png, then it's Amara, then Lila Lens. Okay, so I just save that. Then when I return back to the web page, you'll notice our status are looking really good. Now you're going to notice that some of these status don't have the new status ID. Okay, for example, now this is Nina Daily. When I go to that Nina Daily, you're going to notice that it does not have that ID of new status. That's why I add the background is actually gray, which means this user does not have a new status. Okay, so I'm going to scroll through the status section. You can see that it's looking really good. So next we can start working on creating each of the posts. So inside my index.html file, I just wrap up this status section. I'll wrap it up. I'm done here. Now I'll create another div. I'll give this one a class of posts. And this is the container that's going to wrap around all our posts. So it's going to contain a div. And each of these divs is going to have a class of posts. Now I'm going to style up this post container. So I'm going to copy this post class. I'll head to my style of CSS file. Down here I'm going to say dot main feed, then dot post. Okay, I want to give this one a width of 75%. I'll give it a height of 100 views so that we can actually see it. Then I'll give it a background color of red. I'll save that. When I go back to the web page, you can see that post container right here. And the reason I give it a width of 75% is that you are going to notice that in the final project, the width this status section occupies is actually larger than the width this post occupies. Okay, each of the posts are going to occupy a smaller portion in the post container. Okay, so that's why I gave it a width of 75%. But you are going to notice that it's not actually at the center, so I want to add a margin property to it. So I want to give this a margin top and bottom. I want a margin of 25 pixels, and left and right I want a margin of auto. And that margin of auto left and right is going to ensure that it's actually at the center, and the margin 25 pixels is going to add a margin between this post container and this status section right here, this little margin right here. Now with that, we've gotten the structure for the post container. Now we can start adding each of the post items. So I just go back to my style of CSS. So I'll get rid of this height of 100 views and this background color of red. I'll save that. So I head back to my index.html file. Now inside this post container, I'm going to create another div. And this div is going to have a class name of post header. And this post header div is always going to contain these items at the header of the post, this image, this username details, and this icon right here. Okay. First of all, it's going to have a div. It's going to have a class name of user details. Inside this user details, we're going to have another div. And this one is going to have a class of image container or image wrapper, whatever you want to call it, image container. Then inside this one, we're going to have an image. And it's going to go into the images folder. I'm going to access the status1.jpg. I'm going to use the status1 image. Then here is going to be profile pic as the alt text. So after that image content, I'm going to have another div. This one is going to have a class of user info. And inside this div, I'm going to have a p tag that's going to say techie gear. Okay. And also inside this p tag, I'm going to have a span. And the first span is going to have this dot in it. Then the second span is going to say 33 minutes. And this is going to have a class of dots. And this one is going to have a class of time stamp. After this p tag, I'm going to have another p tag. And this p tag is simply going to say Sydney, Australia. I'll save that. When I go back to the web page, I'm going to notice that we have this humongous image right here in the web page. So let's quickly style up this image. So I head to my style of CSS file. Down here, I'm going to say dot main feed dot post dot the post header. I want to target the image inside this post header. Okay, I want to give it a width of 35 pixels, a height of 35 pixels, a border radius of 50%, and object fit of cover. I'll save that. When I return back to the web page, you can notice that that image has been styled up. But we are not actually done yet. You are going to notice that this image also is also going to have something like a rainbow background, and that's why I added this image container div around this image, okay, so that I can add that background color. So let's actually do that. So I head to my style.css file. Up here I'm going to say dot main feed dot post dot post dot post header, and I'll target the image container class. I'll just copy that from here. Copy this image container class. I'll head to my style.css file. I'll paste that right here. And this container is not spelled correctly. It's not container, it's container. Head back and actually correct that in my HTML file. Yeah, better. Okay, now inside this container, I'm going to give it a width of 40 pixels. I'll give it a height of 40 pixels. I'll give it a background color of gray. Remember that by default, without an active status, these images are going to have a background color of gray. I'll give it a border radius of 50%. Okay, I'll save that. When I head back to the web page, you're going to notice that this now has a gray background color, but let's actually ensure the image at the center. So I just give it where is that? Let me copy those styles I had to this one. These two styles, display of grid and place item center. I'll just paste that right here, and that's going to ensure that this image is actually at the absolute center of this image container. Okay, so now all we have to do is just add that ID. Okay, so I want to go to my HTML file. Now that's actually why I created that unique ID. I just say ID is equals to new status ID. I'll save that. When I go back to the web page, you'll notice that that rainbow background color is now at the back of this image. So then I'm going to give this image and this a display of flex. Remember that they are inside this user details container. Okay, so I'm going to target this user details container and give it a display of flex. So I'm going to go back to my code. So I'll say post header, then up here I'll just paste that right here, then dot user details. I want to give it a display of flex, align items, I'll say center. I add a gap of 12 pixels, and I'll just ensure this has a cursor of pointer. I'll save that, and that's going to ensure that they are arranged side by side. There's a gap between them. So next I'm going to style up this p tag, this techie get p tag, then I'll style up this location right here. You're going to notice that inside our user info we have two p tags, okay, and each of these p tags are going to have different styles. So we are going to target them using the first child pseudo class and the last child pseudo class. Okay, so I want to go back to my style.css file. I want to copy this right here. I'll paste that underneath here, underneath this image right here. Then I'll target the first p tag. I'm going to say the first child as the first p tag inside this user details container. I want to give it a font weight of 500 and a font size of 0.85 rem. Okay, let me check that out, and this is actually looking better. So also I want to give these spans their unique style. So I also want to copy this. I just copied this. I'll paste that underneath here. Now I want to target the span inside this first p tag. I'll give them a font size of 0.8 rem. I want them to have a smaller font size, a color of text secondary, and a font weight of 300. I'll save that. Going back to the web page, you can notice that these span tags now have their own unique style. Okay, so next let's style up the Sydney Australia text. I'll copy this. I'll paste that underneath here. Then I'm going to target the last child, the last p tag child. Okay, I'll give it a font size of 0.7 rem and a font width of 300. I'll save that. That's looking way better. So the last thing I'm going to do for the post header, I'm going to add that 3-dot icon that's going to be on the right hand side of this post. Okay, so I head back to my index.html file. Now underneath this, after this user details right here, after this user details, I also wrap this up. I'm going to add an icon after this user details, and this icon is going to have a class of far ellipsis ish. I'll save that. Now when I return back to the web page, you're going to notice that we cannot see that icon. That's because that icon is actually black in color, so we can't actually see. So I'm going to give these icons, all the icons, a general style of whites, because I'm going to be using icons a lot. So up here, I just give icons a general color of white, and that's going to ensure that all the icons I add to the web page are actually white, and you can see that icon right here underneath this image. So next, I want to add a flex display to this post header, because I want these items right here to be at the left hand side. I want this icon right here to be at the right hand side. So I'm going to apply a display flex to the post header. So just scroll down. There's that post header. Don't think we've added styles to it. I just copy this. I'll just paste that up here. And I'm going to give this a display. I'll give it flex. I'll give it an align items of center. Then a justified contents or space between. This is going to add space between the icon and the items at the left hand side. And you can see that the icon is now right here, while these items are now at the left hand side. With that, you are basically done styling the post header. So we can now start styling the post image. So I'm going to add the post image. I'll go to my index.html file. I'll just wrap up this post header. And after this post header div, I want to create an image tag. And this image is going to go into the images folder. It's going to access post1.jpg. And the alt text is going to be post. Okay, I'll save that. Now, obviously, when I go back to the web page, the image is going to be very large. Let's quickly style it up. So I head back to my style.css file down here. Now I just noticed I didn't add a border to this image. Now this image is supposed to have a border. This image is supposed to have a border just like this one. So I didn't add a border. So let me do that. I'll say I want to add a border of 2 pixels, solid BG main. I saw this black. I'll save that. And you can see that border has been applied to this profile picture right here. So let me style this image. So I'll just go down here. Down here, I'm going to say dot main feed dot post. Now I want to target each of the posts. Okay. Then I want to target the image of the post. For the image, I'll give it a width of 100%. I'll give it a height of auto. Okay. A border radius of 3 pixels. I just want a little bit of border radius. And lastly, a border of 1 pixel, solid gray. I'll save that. And now I return back to the web page. You can see this image is looking really, really good. And you can see that gray border at the edges of this image looking really, really good. But the image is too close to this post header, so we are going to add a margin between them. So I'm going to head to my post header styles. Where's that post header style? Right here. I'm going to give this a margin. I'll say bottom of 15 pixels. Yeah, this is way better. This is way, way better. All right. Now, before I start working on the items that are going to be on the footer of the post, I want to give it a padding bottom so that we can actually see it better. So I'll go to my post style. Where is the style for my posts? Post, yeah, right here. I'm going to give this a margin, or sorry, a padding bottom of 80 pixels. Okay, and that's going to ensure that we have a padding right here at the bottom of this post section. We can actually scroll through it. So next, we can start working on the items that are going to be at the footer of the post. Okay, all these items right here. So I'm going to go back to my index.html file. Under this image, I'll create a div. Now this is going to have a class of post footer. First off, it's going to have a div. It's going to have a class of post reactions. And inside this div, we're going to have another div. That's going to have a class of left actions. And these are going to contain our heart icon, our comment icon, I think our share icon. Okay. Inside this one, I'm going to have an icon. Then the class is going to be far heart. I have another icon. This one is going to be far comment. Then I have another icon. This one is going to be far paper plain. Now after this left reaction, I'm going to have another icon right here. This one is going to be a class of far bookmark. I'll save that. Now when I head back to the web page, you can see those icons right here underneath this post image. So let's start actually applying styles to this. So I'm going to copy that post footer. Just copy this class right here, post footer. I head to my style.css file. Now down here, I'm going to say dot main feed dot post dot the each of the posts. Then I want to target the post footer. Okay, I want to give all the text inside this footer a font size of 0.8 rem. All right, I want a margin bottom of 20 pixels, and lastly, I want a border bottom of 1 pixels solid. This border color right here. I'll save that. And now return back to the web page. You can see that little border underneath this post footer right here, this border right here. So next, I want to style up the icons. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my style.css file. First of all, I have to copy that class. So I'm going to go here, post reaction class. Let me just call this post actions class, post actions. Then I'll copy this class name. I'll head to my style.css file. Inside my style.css file, I'll say dot main feed dot. I want to target each of the posts. Then I want to target the post footer. Then inside the post footer, I want to target this post actions right here. I want to give it a display of flex, and that's going to ensure that the icons, these icons are going to be arranged side by side. Okay. Now I'll give it a justify content. I'll use space between. Then I'll give it an align items of center. I'll save that. And you're going to notice that these left actions are going to be at the left hand side, while this bookmark is going to be at the right hand side. Then I'll add the margin to it. Margin top and bottom, I want 10 pixels, left and right, and 1 0. I'll save that. And now you're going to notice that this icon now has margin at the top and at the bottom of it. Okay. So next I'm going to target the icons. Okay. So I just go back to this post reaction, copy this. I'll paste this underneath here. And for each of the icons, I want to give them a font size of 1.5 rem. I'll save that. Going back to the web page, you can see the icons actually look better this way. But these ones are too close to each other, so I'm going to add a gap between them. I just put them in a flex container, then add a gap between them. So the post reaction, I'm going to copy this. I'll paste that underneath here. Now I'm going to say I want to target the left hand side. That's this left reaction side. That's the icons at the left hand side. I'll paste that right here. Now I'll give this a display of flex, then a gap of 12 pixels. I'll save that. When I return back to the web page, you can see there's now a gap between each of these icons. Let me actually increase it a bit. Let me use 15. That will be the sweet spot. Yeah, this is way better. And you can see that these icons are actually looking really, really good. I'll just give them a cursor of pointer too. So for each of these icons, say I want them to have a cursor of pointer. And when you hover on it, it's like you are hovering over something you can actually click on. So inside my index.html file, I'm going to wrap up this post reaction. I'm done here. Then underneath this post reaction, I'm going to add a p tag. Now this p tag is simply going to say 8,554 likes. Okay, so I'll save that. I head back to the web page. And you can see that p tag right here. So after this p tag, I'm going to have another p tag. And this p tag is simply going to have this text right here. Sundays in the city just hit different. And after that, I'm going to have another p tag. And this p tag is going to say view all 1,540 comments. Okay, I'll save that and check out the output. And you can see all these p tags right here in the web page. Next, I want to add a class name to each of these p tags so that we can actually style them up. So I'll give this one a class of likes. I'll give this one a class of post text, and I'll give this one a class of comments. I'll save that. Now I head back to my style.css file. I'll just copy this post footer. I'll paste that underneath here. Now I'll target the dot likes. For this, I want to give it a font weight of 600, and I want to give it a margin bottom of 5 pixels. Then I'll copy that, paste that underneath here. I'll target the post text. I'll give this one a margin bottom of 5 pixels. I'll paste it underneath here again, and I'll target the comments. Now I want to give this one a color, a text color of text secondary. I'll save that. And when I return back to the web page, you can see these elements are styled, but this view all comments, the styles are not being applied. Why? Okay, this one is comments here, then this one is comments. Let me correct that. It's not supposed to be comments, it's supposed to be comments. Get that class right. Yeah, that's really good. So next, I'm going to add that input that the user can type, and when the user wants to leave a comment, this input right here. So let's do that. So I head back to my index.html file. Just underneath this pizza, I'm going to create a div, and this is going to have a class of comments container, because it's going to wrap around everything in that comment input. Now inside this comments container, we're going to have an input, and this input is going to have a placeholder that's simply going to say add a comment ... After that, we're going to have a div that's going to wrap around the post button and also the emoji icon you're going to see at the right hand side. Okay, and this is going to have a class of comment button, and inside this container I'm going to have a button, and this button is simply going to say post, and after this button I'm going to have an icon that's going to have a class of smile. Sorry, spell that smile correctly. Smile. Now save that and check out the output, and you can see those items I just added right here. Add a comment, this post button, and this icon right here, this emoji icon right here. Now let's start applying styles to these elements. So I want to head to my style.css file. First of all, I'll copy this comments container class. I'll head to my style.css file, and then I'm going to say dot main field dot post footer. Sorry, post footer. Then I'll paste that right here. First off, I want to give it a display of flex because I want the items to be arranged side by side. Then I'll give it a justify content or space between. Also, I'll align items of center. I'll save that. I'll check out the output. You can see right now that these inputs at the left hand side, while the post button and that emoji icon is at the right hand side. But they are too close to this view all 1540 comments, and also this line right here. So I'm going to add a margin to this container. So I'm going to give this container a margin, top and bottom. I'm going to give it a margin of 15 pixels. Left and right, I'll give it a margin of 0. And that's going to add space between this container and the items above and below the container. Now we have a problem. You are going to notice that this input is only occupying up to this place, but I want this input to occupy up to this point. So what I'm going to do, I want to give this input a width of 100%. So I'll just copy this comments container. I'll paste that underneath here. Then I'll just target the input inside this comments container. I'm going to give this input a width of 100%. And this is going to tell the input to stretch out and occupy 100% of its parent container. But you see the problem we are now having now. When this input stretches out, it's going to actually compress these items right here, this post button and this emoji icon. We don't want that. We don't want this element at the right hand side to actually shrink. So what we are going to do, we're going to give this comments button container a flex shrink of 0. So I'll just copy this right here. I'll paste that underneath here. Now I'll head to my HTML. I'll just copy that class name, that comments button class name that wraps around the button and the icon. I'll paste that over here, and I'm going to give that a flex shrink. I'll give it 0, and this is going to tell the elements not to shrink at all. You're going to know that this, no matter how far the input actually stretches out, the input is not going to shrink that container. So next I'm going to add a gap between the input and this item. So let's do that. I'm just going to go back to that comments container. I'm going to say I want to have a gap there of 15 pixels. I'll save that. When I return back, you're going to notice that there's not a gap between the input and these buttons right here. So let's actually style up this input. So first off, I'm going to give this input a background of transparent, and that's going to ensure that the input is actually transparent and we can actually see through the input. Next, I'll get rid of the border. So I'm going to say border. I'm going to say none. I'm going to say outline. I'm going to say none. Then when you tap on this input, I want the color of the text to be text primary, which is basically white. Save that and go back to the web. Now when I tap on this, you're going to notice that it's actually white and the input is actually looking really good. So next thing we're going to do, we're going to style up this post button right here. So I'll go back to my style of CSS file. I'll copy this. Now paste that underneath here. I'm going to say .comment button. I want to target the button inside this comment button container. I'll give this button a background color of transparent. I'll give it a color of blue. I want it to have a font weight of 600, and also I don't want it to have any border, so I'm going to say border. I'm going to use none. Then lastly, I'll just add a cursor of pointer, and I'll save that. When I go back to the web page, you can see that button right here is completely styled post. Okay, next I'm going to add a margin between this post button and this icon right here. So I'm just going to give this a margin. I'll give it white of 5 pixels. I'll save that. And when I return back to the web, you're going to notice that there's now a margin between this post button and this icon. Now I think with that we are done styling the post. Okay, so let's actually create another post. So I'm going to go back to my index.html file. I'll just wrap up this post right here. I'll wrap this up. I'll copy this and I'm going to drag that down. Okay, I'll save that. Then when I go back to the web page, I'm going to notice that we have another post right here. We now have 2 posts, though they are similar, but we actually have 2 posts right here. So I'm going to update the details of the second post. Okay, for the second post, the image is going to be post 2. Then for the name, let me open up this post header. Then for the name, open up this user details. Then for the name, is going to be queen.seed. Then for the location, it's going to be New York, USA. Then for the timestamp, I'll just change this to 2 hours. Okay. Now what am I going to change again? Then for the profile picture, I'm going to use status 3. Then I'm going to scroll down. Then for the likes, you can use any number here. I just use 84 likes. Then for the post, I'm going to get rid of this post right here. Then I'll use this dummy post right here. Then for the comments, I'll just use this 140 comments. Then I think we are done. Yeah, I'm going to save that. Now when I return back to the web page, I'm going to notice that the second post has been updated. Queen said, New York, USA, 2 hours ago. Morning tastes better with the vanilla latte. Yeah, this is actually looking really good. Really good. So let's actually add the third and final post. So I'm just going to go up here. I'm going to fold this up. I'll just copy this and I'm just drag this down. I'm going to open this up. Now for this one, it's going to be post 3. The profile picture is going to be status 4. The timestamp, I'm going to use 2. Let me just use 4 days. 4 days ago. For the location, I'll use Lagos, Nigeria. For the username, I'm going to use dami.xo. I'll scroll down. For the likes, I'll just use, okay, let me just use 150 likes right here. Then for the post, I'm going to get rid of this one. Then I'll paste this post right here. I'm going to make use of this post. Then view all. Let me just use 10 comments. Then yeah, I'm done with the third one. So I'm going to save that and head back to the web page. And you can see we have the third post right here. The first post, the second post, and we have the last post right here, Queen said. And now we can scroll through the feed and can see how smooth that's actually looking. And scroll through the status section. Very clean. So I'm going to head back to my index.html. I'm going to wrap up this post. In fact, I'm just going to wrap up everything that has to do with the post. So I'm just going to go up here, wrap up this other post, wrap up this other post, then wrap up the feed section. I think we are basically done with the feed section. Wrap up the feed section. I'm also going to wrap up the main feed right. I'll wrap this up. Now underneath here, I want to create that button. So next we're going to start working on this messages button. Now when you click on it, it's going to open up the messages of the user. When you click on it, it's going to close it up. So let's start working on this. Okay. Now underneath this main feed right div, I want to create another div that's going to have a class of message button. And let me label this so that we understand what this code is doing. So I'm going to say this is going to be the message button. Then I'll just comment that off. And inside this div, I'm going to have a container I'll call this container icon text, because this is the container that's going to house the icon and the text at the left hand side of this button. So I want to add an icon, and this icon is going to have a class of Facebook Messenger. Messenger. Then after that, I'm going to have a span. I'm simply going to say messages. Now after this icon text div, I'll create another div, and this particular div is going to have a class of images, and this is a div that's going to house the two overlapping images at the right hand side of the button. It's going to have two images in it. The first image is going to go to the images folder. It's going to access status1.jpg, and the alt text is going to be profile pic. Okay, so I'll drag that down. The second one is going to be status3. Now returning back to the web, you can see these humongous images right here. Let's quickly add styles to them. So I'm going to copy this class name, copy this message button class name. I head to my style.css file. Underneath here, I'm just going to paste that right here. I'm going to target the images class. That's this images class right here that wraps around these two images. Then I'm going to target the image inside the images class. I give the image a width of 25 pixels, a height of 25 pixels, a border radius of 50% to ensure it's actually circular. Object fit, I'm going to give it cover, and last I'm going to add a border around the image of 1 pixel, solid gray. I'll save that. Now you can see that the images are actually circular and they are up here. Now you're going to notice the problem we're actually facing right now. You're going to notice that the images are actually positioned right here. Now why is this happening? That's because in HTML, elements by default have a position of static, and when an element has a position of static, it's going to follow the document flow. Remember that we added this container, and then we added this container, and then we added this container right here. So right now HTML believes that this is supposed to be the document flow, okay, which means we are giving this item, and this item a display of flex. Okay, so we have to tell HTML that we don't want this item in the document flow. We want this item to be positioned fixed relative to the viewport. So let's do that. So I'm going to go back to my style.css file. I'll copy this message button. Then I'm going to paste that up here. Now I'll give this a position. I'll use fixed. Now I want it to be positioned on the bottom right. So I'm going to say bottom. I'll say 40 pixels. Then I'll say right. I'll use 40 pixels. I'll save that. Now when I return back to the web page, you're going to notice that these items are going to be positioned right here at the bottom right corner of the web page. And when we scroll through the web page, you're going to notice that it doesn't really affect those elements. Okay, this icon is white. I didn't add styles to this icon. Let me quickly do that. I'll just get this. I'll paste that underneath here. Now just target the icon. I want to give the icon a color of text secondary. I don't want it to be white. I want it to have a color of text secondary. Yeah, that's way better. I prefer it this way. Back to what we are doing now. You notice that when you scroll through the web page, you're going to notice that it doesn't really affect this message button. No matter what you scroll, it's always going to be positioned at the bottom left corner of, and that's how you position an element fixed relative to the viewport of the device that the web page is being viewed on. So I'm going to apply more styles to this. So I'll give the message button a background color of message box color. I'll give it a color of text primary, which is basically white. I'll save that. And when I return back to the web page, you can see that box right here. Okay, so let's actually add more styles to this. I'm going to give it a width of 250 pixels. A padding, top and bottom, I want to have a padding of 12 pixels. Left and right, I want to have a padding of 20 pixels. Then a border radius of 30 pixels. I'll save that. And when I return back to the web, you can notice that this is actually looking way better. But we don't want it to be this way. We want these images at the right hand side, and we want these messages and this icon at the left hand side. So we're going to give this a display of flex. And once I want this to have a display, I'll say flex, and I want it to have a justified content of space between. Then I'm also going to add an align items of center to ensure the items are vertically centered. Now you can notice they are looking way better this way. Next, I'm going to style up the icon. I want to increase the font size of the icon. I also want to increase the margin between this icon and this messages text. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the web page. I'll just down here, I'm going to say dot message button. I want to target the icon in there. I'll give the icon a font size of 1.1 rem, a margin right of 5 pixels to add the margin between the icon and the messages text. And this is way better. So the last thing we're going to do in this button is that we want these images to actually overlap each other. Okay, to do that, I want to give each of the image a margin left pop theme. So I'm just going to go to the image style. I want to say margin left. I want to say -10 pixels, and this is going to ensure that the image actually overlap each other just like this. So next, I'm going to add a hover property to this button and also a cursor of pointer. So I go back to my style of CSS. First of all, I'm going to add a cursor of pointer. Then down here, I'm going to say message button. On hover of this button, I also add a background color of this hover BG right here. I'll save that. And then we turn back to the web page. When I hover on this, you can see that little background color on it, and it has a cursor of pointer. We are basically done with this message button. Now we are going to work on the box that's going to appear when the user click on this button. Let's do that. So I'll go back to my index.html file. I'll just wrap everything up in this message button. Then down you want to have Then down here, I'm going to have the latest messages. I'll just comment that off. Now I'm going to create a div. I'll give this div a class name of message lists. Inside this div, I'm going to have another div, and this div is going to have a class of header, and this is going to be the message box header. That's when we go to the finished project, we'll click on this. This is going to be this header right here. That's going to contain this messages text and this icon right here. That's the message header. Inside this message header, I'm going to have a span. I'm simply going to say messages. After this span, I'm going to have a button. And inside this button, I'm going to have an icon. And this icon is going to have a class of far times. I'll save that. And let's start applying styles to this message list. I'm going to copy this. All right, to my style of CSS file. Down here, I'm going to paste that underneath here. I'll give this message list a width of 280 pixels, a height of 500 pixels, and the background color of message box color. I'll save that. And when I return back to the web page, you can see that box right here. Okay, but the box is inside the document flow. We don't want it to be in the document flow. We want it to be fixed right here, just like this messages button. So let's do that. I'll give this a position of fixed. It's going to be fixed at the bottom of the web page. It's going to have a bottom of 40 pixels. It's going to have a right of 30 pixels, and also I want it to have a border radius of 15 pixels. I'll save that. Now when I return back to the web page, you can see that box right here is positioned at the bottom right corner of the web page. Now we can start styling the elements of the box. That's this messages right here and this button right here. Let's do that. So I head back to my index.html file. Now I'm going to target this header right here. So I want to say .message list. Then I want to target the header inside that message list container. I'll give it a display of flex. So I arrange the messages and the button in a flex container. A justify content or space between. Add an align items of center to center them vertically of center. I'll give the header a padding of 15 pixels. And lastly, I'll give it a color of text primary, which is basically white. And I return back to the web page. You can see right now that this message is white and it's at the left hand side, while this one is at the right hand side. Next, I want to style up this span text and also this button right here. I want to style them individually. So in my style of CSS file, I'll just copy this. I'll paste this underneath here. I'm going to target the span inside this header. I'll give this span a font weight of 500 and a font size of 0.9 rem. I'll save that. And you're going to notice that the messages text is going to actually look better this way. And let's style up this button right here. So to do that, I'll just copy this. I'll paste that underneath here. Then I'm going to target the button inside the header container. For the button, I'm simply just going to give it a background color of transparent. I want it to be transparent. I want it to have a cursor of pointer and a border of none. I don't want any border in the button. When I go back to the web page, you can see that that item is actually styled right here. But I'm going to increase the font size of the icon a bit. So in my style of CSS, so I just copy this. I'll paste that underneath here. Now I want to target the icon inside the button. I'm going to give it a font size. I'll give it a font size of 1.3 rem. I'll save that. Now going back to the web page, you're going to notice that the icon is actually looking better this way. So next, I'm going to add that line that's going to be underneath this header. Okay, so I'll go back to my index.html. Now after this header, I'm going to create a div. I'll call this div, or I'll give it a class name of line. I'll save that. Now head to my style of CSS file. Now down here, I'm going to copy this. I'll paste that underneath here. Then I'll just target that line class. I'll give it a height of 1 pixels, a width of 100%. I want it to occupy 100% of its parent container. I'll give it a background color of gray. And lastly, I'll give it an opacity of 0.4. I don't want it to be too obvious. When I go back to the web page, you can see that line underneath this header right here. So next, we can start working on the latest message and actually display the messages. Let's do that. So after this line div, I'm just going to wrap up this header, wrap this up. Then after this line div, I'm going to create another div. Now inside this, I'm going to create an anchor tag. Now this anchor tag is not going to go anywhere, so I'm going to use hash. Then inside this anchor tag, I'm going to have a div that's going to have a class of image. And this is the div that's going to wrap around the image of the latest message. So in there, I'm going to add an image. And this image is going to go into the images folder. And it's going to access image to the JPG. And the alt text is going to simply going to say profile pic. After this image div, I'm going to have another div. And this div is going to have a p tag. And this p tag is simply going to say Tina Savvy. And after that p tag, I'm going to have another p tag that's going to say active 11 hours ago. So next, I'm quickly going to style up this image inside this anchor tag, okay? Because when we go back to the web page, you're obviously going to see that the image is very, very large, okay? So let's do that. So I'll go back to my style CSS file. Down here, I'm going to say dot message list. Then I want to target the anchor tag. Now inside that anchor tag, I want to target that dot image class. That's this image class container that wraps around the image, okay? I'll give it a width of 55 pixels. I'll give it a height of 55 pixels. And I'm going to target the image inside the image container. Then I'll just paste that right here and I'll target the image. Now, since the image container already has a width and height of 55 pixels, all we have to do is set the image to occupy 100%. So I'll give it a width of 100%. Then I'll give it a height. I'll use 100%. Then I'll give it an object fit of cover. I'll save that. And I go back to the web page. You can see that image right here, and we also have to add a border radius to it to make it look really good. So I'm going to add a border radius, and since I want it to be circular, I'm going to give it 50%. And you're going to notice that the image is actually circular and actually looking really, really good. Next, I'm going to apply a display of flex because I want the image and I want this Tina Savvy and active 1 hour ago to be at the right hand side. I want them to be arranged horizontally. So I want to target the anchor tag. I'll copy this. I'll paste this up here. Now I want to give this anchor tag a display of flex. Align items of center. And I want a gap of 10 pixels between the image and those p tags, okay? And you can see there's a gap between them. They're now arranged side by side. But it's not actually looking good because they are too close to the edges, okay? So I'm going to add a padding around this anchor tag. So in my style of CSS, I'm going to add the padding. I'll give it a padding, top and bottom. I'm going to use 10 pixels. Left and right, I'll use 15 pixels. And when I return back to the web page, you can see that this is actually looking very, very, very good. Now we have to style this stupid tag, but this first one, this one is already looking okay. But I want to style this active 11 hour ago. I want to actually make it smaller. So I want to target that. Now I'm going to copy this. I'll paste that underneath here. I want to target the p tag inside the anchor tag, and I want to target the last p tag. Remember that this active 1 hour ago is the last p tag inside this anchor tag. So I want to target the last one. Okay. So I'm going to use the last child pseudo class. I'll go to a font size of 0.75 rem and a color of test secondary. I'll save that. And I return back to the web page, and this is actually looking really good. Active 11 hour ago. So you're just going to add another message. So I'll go back to my index.html file. I'm going to copy this. I'll just drag this down. The second one is going to have an image of status 1, and it's going to have a name of this name right here. And for the timestamp, I'm going to say active 2 days ago. And when I go back to the web page, you can see the second message right here, Sophie Williams. Now we understand who created these messages right here. So I'm just going to add the remaining 2. I'm going to return back. Now under the second message, I'll just paste the other messages right here. And for the third one, we have this one with profile picture of status 3. Then the name is Seth Johnson, active 2 days ago. We have the last one, status. The profile picture is status 4. We have the name Damini Adebayo, then active 22 seconds ago. I'll save that. And I return back to the web page. You can see those messages right here. And when we hover on these links, I want to add a property to it, a background color to it. So I'm just going to go back to my style.css file. I'll copy this. Now underneath this message and contact style, I'll say on hover. And when someone hovers on this, I want to give it a background color of this hover BG right here. I'll save that. And when I return back to the web page, when I hover on this, you can see that little nice background color being applied to the links. So next, we're going to work on this green dot right here. That's going to be positioned at the bottom right corner of the image. That's going to signify that the user is actually online. So let's do that. So I head back to my index.html file. Now inside this last one, inside this image content, I'm going to create a div, and this div is going to have a class of online dots. Now just copy that class name. I head to my style.css file. I'll scroll down here. I'm going to say dots message list dots the online dots. First, I'll give this a width of 12 pixels. I'll give it a height of 12 pixels. I'll give it a background color of this hair color right here. Give it a border radius of 50% to ensure it's circular. And last, I'm going to give it a position of absolute. I'll position it at the bottom of 0 and right of 0. I'll save that. Now when I return back to the web page, I'm going to notice that that green dot is positioned at the bottom right corner of this message list right here. It's not positioned at the bottom left corner of this image and this image container. The reason for that is because HTML elements by default has a position of static. These images, these links right here, all have a position of static. So if you don't say otherwise, the elements in your HTML are going to have a position of static. Now the reason it's positioned at the bottom left corner of this message list container is because this message list container does not have a position of static. Remember, we gave this message list container a position of fixed, so it's not a position of static. That's why it's being positioned to this message list container. If this message list container did not have a position of fixed, it actually had a position of static. This green dot is going to be positioned relative to the viewport. It's going to be positioned right here. Okay. So to actually ensure that this green dot is positioned absolute to this image, what we are going to do is we're going to give this image container a position of relative. So I'm going to go up here. Where's that message? Yeah, that image container. I'm going to give this a position of relative. And since this no longer has a position of static, when I return back to the web page, you're going to notice that that green dot is going to be positioned absolute to this image container right here. So next, I'm going to add a white border around this green dot. So I'll scroll down. So I want to add a border of 2 pixels solid. text primary, which is basically white. When I return back to the web page, that's looking really good. So I'm going to add that green dot to this other Sophie Williams message right here. So I'll go back to my index.html file. I'll just copy this div right here. I'll scroll up. Then I'll just paste that right here. Then I'm just going to say the user is actually active. Take away this 2 days ago. I'll save that. And when I return back to the web page, I'm going to notice that that green dot is now the second message right here. And this message container is looking really good. Now the message container is not going to be this way. We want this to have a display of none. We want it only to be visible to the user when the user clicks on that message button that's underneath this one. Okay, so I'm going to give this message lists. I'll give this message lists. There's that message list container, message list. Yeah, I'll give this a display. I'll give it none. Now that's going to ensure the user is not going to see that message list in the viewport when the user comes to the website. The user is only going to see it when he clicks on this messages button right here. So we are going to use a little bit of JavaScript to actually accomplish that. So I'm going to go to my index.html file, scroll all the way down, and just before this body tag, I'll create a script. Then inside this script, first of all, I'm going to target 2 items. First of all, I'm going to target this message box right here, and also I'm going to target the message list. Okay, so I head back to my index.html file. I'm going to scroll up. Now this message box, I'm going to give it a unique ID of message button. I'll save that. And for the message list, I'm going to give it a unique ID of message lists, or you can call it latest messages. Now I'm going to scroll down. Now I'm going to use JavaScript to actually target those 2 HTML documents. Okay, so down here I'm going to say document dot. I want to get the element by the ID name. And which element do I want to get? I want to first of all get this button. We give an ID of message button. So I'll copy this. I'll head down. I'll paste that right here. Okay, now we have to actually set this to a variable in JavaScript so that we can actually reuse this document. So I want to say I'll call it const button. Then anytime I want to do something with this button, we don't have to call this message button anymore. This document, we just call the variable name the button. Okay, so down here I'm going to create another variable, const messages is equals to documents dot. I'm going to get it by the ID name. So get element by ID. Now which ID name? I'm going to copy that ID name and give to this message list, which is this message list ID name. I'll copy that. I'll scroll down. Now paste that right here. So next we're going to target the close button. Okay, so remember that in our final project, when we click on these messages button, it's going to open up this message list box. And when we click on this X, it's going to close it up. So we have to target that X too. So I'm going to go up in my code. In that, I'm going to give this button a unique ID. I'll give it an ID of close button. I'll just copy that ID name. I'm going to head back down. Then down here, I'm going to say const. I'll just call the variable name close button. It's equals to documents dot. I'm going to get the element by the ID name, and I'll just pass the ID name in here. Okay, now we've targeted the button we are going to use to open the box. We've targeted the box, and we have also targeted the button we are going to use to close the box. Okay, so what we want to do is that, remember, we gave this box a display of none. Okay, so we are going to create a new class that we are going to use to toggle the class. Okay, we're going to create a new class that's going to have a display of block. Then we can use that button to add and remove the class. Okay, so down here I'm going to create a class. I'll call this class show message or show messages. This is a better naming convention. Then I'm going to give this a display of block, and I'll save that. Now what I'm going to use JavaScript to do, I'm going to use JavaScript to add and remove the class. Now if I copy this class and I go to my index.html file and I paste that, remember this has a display of none. And if I add that class to this message list class and save that, now when I return back to the web page, you're going to notice that the box is actually open. That's because it's having that extra class that has a display of block. Now when I take off that class and save that, you're going to notice that the box is no longer in the UI. the box has disappeared. Now has a display of none. And that's what we are going to use JavaScript to do. We're going to use JavaScript to add and remove that show messages class. So let's do that. So I'm going to scroll down to my JavaScript. Down here, I want to add an event listener to this button. I'll say button dot. I'm going to add an event listener. Now, what event listener do I want to listen for? I want to listen for the click event. Now, when someone clicks on that button, I want to run a function called open message box. Then down here, I'll create that function. I'll say function open message box. And inside this function, what I'm simply going to do, I'm going to take the messages. I'm going to target the class list. Then I'm going to add that class right here, that show messages class. That way, when someone clicks on that open button, that button is going to add that show messages class to that div. Okay. Now, when I go back to the web page, now when I click on this, it's going to open it up. Now, when I click on this, it's not going to close it up. So let's actually work on that. So I'll go back there and create another event listener. I'll add another event listener, but this time I'm going to add an event listener to this close button. So I'll say close button dot add event listener. Now I want to listen for a click event. And when someone clicks on it, I want to run a function called close message box. Okay. So down here, I'll create that function. I'll call the function close message box. Now inside this function, I'm going to say messages dot class list dot remove. This time I'm going to remove the show messages class. Okay. Now it's going to go back to having a display of none. Just format documents. Now when I return back to the web page, when I click on these messages button, it's going to open up this box of latest messages. Now when I click on this X, it's going to close it up. And with that, I think we are basically done styling the web page. We've basically done everything. Okay, let's quickly add a footer underneath this post right here. Okay, so I'll just go back to my index.html file. I'll scroll up. I'll wrap up this message list. I'm done here. I'm done with this one. With the message button, I'll open up this main feed right. That footer, I'm going to copy that footer. Then I'll close it up. Then in my feeds, I'm going to now just underneath this last post right here, inside this post content, I'm going to paste that footer right here. And I'm going to add a style to it. Add a style of text align center. And the reason I'm doing that is that if I don't add this text align of center, let me take this off now and save. When I go back to the web page, I'm going to notice that the footer is going to be there, but it's going to be aligned to the left, because for the right sidebar, it's aligned to the left right here. And I want it to be aligned to the left right here. It's okay this way. But for this one, I want it to be at the center. So I just add that class of text align center. I'll save that. Now when I return back to the web, you can see the footer is right here. It's looking good. Okay. I won't click on this. It's going to open up our messages list. Okay, so now we are basically done styling the web page. Now we have to start working on making it responsive. And when I shrink this screen, I'm going to notice that this is not responsive at all. It's not responsive at all. So we have to start working on actually making it responsive. Now to actually do that, first of all, I have to create a new file. I'll call this file responsive.css. I'll just close this up again. Now inside this responsive.css, I'm going to have 4 breakpoints. The first breakpoint is going to be for large laptops or desktops. I'll say desktops. And the breakpoint is going to be 1280 pixels. I'll comment that off. I'll create another breakpoint. I'll just copy this and I'll drag that down. I'll create another breakpoint. And this one is going to be for small laptops, basically laptops. I'll give this one 1024 pixels. Then I'll create another breakpoint. And this breakpoint is going to be for tablets. And it's going to be 768 pixels. I'll create another breakpoint again. And this one is going to be for mobile phones. I'll save that. Now up here, I'm going to say at media max width of 1280 pixels. Now this screen size, first of all, I'm going to test. I want to give the body, that is the entire body, a background color of maybe blue or red. So actually test if the media query is working. So I'll just scroll up here. This body, I'll give it a background color of blue. So I want to give this the body a background color of blue. Sorry, blue. Now this is not going to take any effect unless we import this in our index.html file. So inside our index.html file, I'll just drag this down. Instead of style.css, I want to import the responsive.css. I'll save that. And when I go back to my web page, when I reduce the screen size, you'll notice that for a certain screen size, it's going to have a background color of blue. Now let's trace that breakpoint. You can see that breakpoint right here at 1280 pixels. So I'll get rid of that background color of blue. Get rid of the body. Let's get rid of that. Now this screen size, what style do I want to actually apply? Let me check it out. And when I start to reduce, you're going to notice that these items start to actually compress. So the first thing we are going to do, we're going to reduce the padding at the right hand side of this main feed, okay? And also we're going to increase the width of this post because this post is getting too tiny. So we're going to increase the width of the post. So I'll go back to my style.css file. I'll just go back to my style.css file, scroll and look for that styles for the main feed. Remember, we gave the main feed a margin right of 10%, so we'll just reduce that margin. So I'll copy this. I'll head to my responsive.css. I'll paste that here. I'll give this a margin right of 5%. I'll save that. And when I return back to the web, you're going to notice that at less than 1280 pixels, that margin is going to be reduced. You can notice right here, the web page is going to actually expand to occupy more space, and the margin is going to reduce to 5%. Next, I'm going to increase the width of this post section right here. So I'll just go back to my style.css file. I'll scroll down. Yeah, this post. I'll copy this. I head to my responsive.css file. Remember, we gave it a width of 75% because I wanted it not to occupy as much space as the status section, but now I want to actually increase the width. So I just go to my responsive.css. I'll paste that right here. I'm going to give this a width of 90%. I'll save that. I'll return back to the web page. Now you're going to notice that it's going to expand at that breakpoint. You can notice it right now. It's going to actually expand. That's looking way more better. Now we can move on to the next breakpoint. I'll just copy this. I'll paste that underneath here. Just close that up. Now instead of 1280 pixels, it's going to be 1024 pixels. Now for the next breakpoint, when we reduce, you're going to notice that the left sidebar is going to start to squish this other part, okay? For the next breakpoint, we want to actually get rid of this left sidebar. Okay, so what we are going to do, we're going to go to our responsive.css. Then I'm going to say .left sidebar. Now for the screen size that is less than 1024 pixels, I want this to have a width of 50 pixels. Okay, I'll save that. And now we turn back to the web page. I'm going to notice that when I reduce the screen size, this left sidebar is going to have a width of 50 pixels. You can see where it starts from here. This one starts to actually overflow. So what we are going to do is that we're going to give this span text a display of none for that screen size. Okay. So down here, I'm going to say .left sidebar. I want to target the nav. I want to target the anchor tag. Then I want to target the span. That is those text. I want to give them a display of none. I'll save that. And when I go back to the web page, I'm going to notice that for that screen size, those spans are going to have a display of none. So next, I'm going to position these icons where so they actually look better. Okay, I'll copy this. I'll paste that up here. I'll give the icons a padding top and bottom 10 pixels, left and right of 0. Now I'm actually reducing the initial padding we give to these links up here. Now we give these links, let me scroll up. We gave these links a padding top and bottom of 50 pixels, left and right of 10 pixels. Now we're using the padding to top and bottom 10 pixels, left and right of 0 pixels. And this time I want to justify the content at the center. I want the icons to be at the center of that 50 pixel sidebar. I'll save that. When I return back to the web page, you can notice that the icons are positioned absolute white here, and this is actually looking way better. But we actually have a problem, and when you hover on this link, you're going to notice that the background color is not actually covering the links. Okay, it's actually like a squish. There's no padding around the icons. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to give this left side by padding property. I want to add a padding top and bottom 0, left and right. I want to add a padding of 5 pixels. Now when I return back to the web page, I'm going to notice that these links are actually looking better when you hover on them. Obviously, you're going to notice now that since we've actually reduced the width of this left sidebar, there's now a space here to be occupied. Okay, so I have to reduce the margin left of this main feed, okay, so that it can occupy up to this point. Okay, so I'll go back to my responsive of CSS. I'll copy this main feed, I'll paste that underneath here, close that up. I'm going to give this a margin left of 12%. Remember that initially when we were designing the web page, we gave this main a margin left of 25 pixels. Okay, so we are reducing that margin to about 12%. I'll save that. And when I return back to the web page, you're going to notice that the main feed is going to stretch and occupy that space right there. Also, you're going to notice that now that the screen size of the devices are reducing, there's really no need to also have large gap between this main feed and this main feed, right? Okay, so you can reduce the gap between them. So I'll go to my responsive of CSS. This main feed, I'm going to give it a gap of 40 pixels. Remember, initially we gave the main feed a gap of 80 pixels between the main feed and the main feed, right? Okay, so I'll just reduce that gap. And when I return back to the web page, I'm going to notice that that gap has been reduced, and this looks actually way better. Now, the last thing I'm going to do for this screen size is that for this screen size, everything is looking good, but for this socialgram text, it's not really looking good at all. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to get rid of this from this O upward. I'm going to get rid of them. I just want only the S. Okay, when we reduce the width of the sidebar, I just want only the X here. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'll go to my index.html file. Now inside my index.html file, I'll cut this up. I'll leave only the X. I'll cut it off. I'll put them inside a span. Okay, that way I can actually style the span on its own. I'm going to head to my responsive.css. Now I'm down here. I'm going to say dot left sidebar. I want to target the logo inside the left sidebar. Now that logo, I want to target the span. Okay, that is that span we just created. That span we just created right here. I want to target that span. And for when the screen size is less than 1024 pixels, I want that span to have a display of none. I'll save that. Now when I return back to the web page, I'm going to notice that the other parts are not going to be there. They're only going to be visible when I expand the screen size. Okay, and the font family is not being applied to this span. Let's quickly fix that up. I'll go to my style of CSS. I look for that logo. Where's that logo class? Let's say about logo Pacifico. I'll just copy this. Say dot left sidebar dot logo, then the span. I also want the span to have these styles right here. I'll save that. Yeah, the font family is actually back. Okay, now when we reduce the screen size, you're going to notice that when it gets to that breakpoint, we're going to really have that X right here. Now you're going to notice that the X is not actually at the center like these icons right here and this image. So let's actually do that. So when we remove the other part, the span, I'm just going to give this I'll just give the logo, that's this logo right here. I'll give this logo a text align of center. Now that's going to ensure that the text inside this logo container is in the center. When I return back, I'm going to say that X is now at the center. And when we expand, I'm going to have socialgram. And when we reduce, that X is going to be present. So I think we are done with this breakpoint. So we can move on to the next breakpoint. I'll just copy this. I'll scroll down. I'll paste that right here. Then for this one, I'll change it to 768 pixels. Okay. Now the first thing I want to do for this breakpoint is I want to get rid of this main feed right. Okay, I don't want this right side anymore. I just want this feed to occupy the entire width. Okay, so let's do that. So I'll go to my style of CSS. I look for that class. I'll scroll all the way down. Yeah, main feed right. I'll get this. Now head to my responsive of CSS. I'll just paste that in here. I'm going to give this a display. I'll say none. I'll save that. Now when I return back to the web page, I'm going to notice that for screen size are less than 768 pixels, that main feed right is not going to be there. Okay. Now we can just totally reduce the margin on the right hand side. So I'll just give the main feed a margin right of 0. Remember, this main feed now has a margin right of 5% initially. Okay, so we just remove all the margin altogether. So when I save that, that's actually better. It's going to occupy up to the edges. Now the next thing, we don't want this status section to have 100% width anymore. We want it to have the same width as this post. Remember, this post has a width of 90%. Okay, so we want the status section to have the same width. So I just go to my style of CSS file and look for that styles for the status. Yeah, the status section. This is the styles. I'll just copy this. I'll head to my responsive of CSS. Then I'll just paste that down here. I'm going to give this a width of 90%. I'll save that. And now return back to the web page. I'm going to notice that it now has a width of 90%, but it's not at the center. You can see that space right here. So what we are going to do, we are going to give it a margin of auto. So I just give this a margin. I'll say auto. And that's going to ensure that it's actually at the center. And this is way better for mobile devices. And I think we are basically done making it responsive, and it's looking good. The final thing we are going to do is that we are going to make this one responsive, because this one is not actually responsive for mobile device. We're going to ensure that this is actually responsive. So what I want to do is that I don't want these messages, text, and these images to show for mobile. I only want this icon to be shown to the user. Okay, so let's work on that. Now the trick I'm going to use, I'm going to create a class called hidden items. Okay, now that hidden item class is going to be applied to this messages span and this image when the screen size reduced to up to 768 pixels. Okay, so I'm just going to add that class. First of all, let me just create that class right here. Say dot hidden items. This is going to have a display of none. Then I'll copy that class thing and add it to the items I want to hide for less than 768 pixels. I'll go to my index.html file. I'll scroll all the way down. Now, where's the button? There's the button right here. First of all, I'll add it to these images right here. Then I'll add this to this span class. I'll paste that name right here. I'll save that. Now, when I return back to the web page, I'm going to notice that those items are no longer visible to the UI. And those items are only going to be visible when the screen size is greater than 768 pixels. Immediately it goes less than 768 pixels, those items are going to actually disappear. Now you're going to notice that the message button still retains its original width. Remember, we gave this message button a width of 250 pixels. Okay, so it's still going to retain that width regardless of whether the span and the images are visible. Okay, so we're going to reduce that width. So I just copy this. I head to my responsive of CSS. I'll paste that down here. Then I'm going to give this a width instead of 60 pixels. I'll give it a height of 60 pixels. I'll save that. And when I return back to the web page, I'm going to notice that it now has a height and width of 60 pixels and it's not actually circular. Okay, now it's actually circular because the border radius we applied to it right here, this border radius of 30 pixels is still being applied to it. Okay, now when I click on this, it's going to open up the message box. When I click on this, it's going to close it up. Now the message box looks actually responsive, but that's not actually the case for actually small devices. That's because we are viewing it on a web on the laptop, but we reduced the screen size. But on a mobile phone, it wasn't really fully responsive. Okay, so we are going to add more steps to it to ensure it's actually fully responsive. Like this message box right here. Let's do that. So I'll go back to my style.css file. I'll look for that message list. Okay, I'll just copy these styles. I'll head to my responsive.css. I'll scroll the way down, paste that right here. I'm going to give this a width of 90%. I'll give it a height of 60 VH. That's going to have 16% of the viewport height of the device is being viewed on. I'll save that. Check out the output. When I click on this, you're going to see this right here. Okay, I want to position it at bottom 20 pixels right of 5%. I'll save that. And this is actually going to be looking better. Now, you're really not going to see a difference here because we are viewing it on a web browser, but on a mobile device, you are going to see the difference. And the reason I'm going this far to actually ensure it's responsive on mobile so that you can actually add this to your portfolio. If you want to add this to your portfolio, you can actually add this and it's going to be fully responsive. That's why I'm actually taking that extra method to actually ensure it's actually fully responsive on mobile devices. And with that, we are basically done with this project. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section below. If you have any issue in the project, leave it in the comment section below. If you enjoy this project build and you actually learned something new today, smash on the like button, okay? It's going to help the YouTube algorithm to push this content to more people just like you who are going to find it helpful. And basically, you can consider it as a little way of supporting the channel. And lastly, if you've not subscribed, ensure you do that and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss out on the next project I'm going to build in this channel. I'll see you in the next video.